Okay.
There you go.
Okay. We have indication that we are recording. So hello to all those who are watching it in person, and hello to all those who are watching the recording. Okay, today is May 20th, and we're resuming our studies after a 2-week hiatus. Going back to the sources as we're looking at the question of patriarchal, matriarchal. Uh, so we see, again, welcome to Eddie and welcome to Sima. And I just want to take a brief look at this. We looked at this closely last time. And when we look at this, oh, actually, let me just go back for a second to another text. There's another text that we can look at, which I hope is around here. There you go. Um, these are the questions that the Rabbi Barmash has for her book. They're not actually in the book, they're on a website from a JPS. So I copied them from the website. And some of the questions that she asks about the patriarchal and matriarchal descent question is an interesting question. Why did they have to write a responsum if they'd already declared made a decision about it. Why do that? What are the arguments? They talk about acts of identification. Um, do we find the additional reasons offers for insisting upon acts of identification? Do you find it compelling? The last question was why was this ruling controversial even within the reform movement? Okay, so we'll come back to those questions. I'm going to just really briefly go through it, and then we'll come back to those questions. Oh, good morning, Rini. Good to
Good
see you.
morning.
So let's just take a quick look back at um, that document which we looked at last time. Gee, you go away for 2 weeks and you don't remember what you did last time. I put the questions on the front of the article so that we could see them right there, in addition to having the article. Okay. Gee, that was clever. All right. I just want to, okay. Can everyone see that? Is it large enough? Okay, good. All right. So here is a teshuva of the from in the book. There are several volumes of contemporary American Reform responsa. I used to own several of those. And what are the origins of matriarchal descent? And by the way, we will find out that that question is not easily answerable. One of the things we will note, and this is true of many historical questions, when the answer is not clear, historians either say, well, I think this is right, and that's it. And then you have other historians who will admit, we really don't know for sure. So we just I'm going to give my best guess, and we'll have to leave it at that. And we'll see that, and as we will see as we go through this, this is precisely what's going to happen with what are the origins. We know when, but Shai Cohen, as we'll see, gives us several possibilities. Okay, and what's the justification for the CCAR? Because already, remember, the CCAR already made this decision when they came out with this document, which, by the way, that's the first question that Rabbi Barmash asked. Why did they, since they've already made the decision, why come out with this document? And why do you think they had to do that? Any suggestion? Well, oh, Rini?
Well, it makes it more official when they come out with a document and it's not just something they've discussed.
Yeah, I think that's precisely, and it was a controversial. Why was it a controversial decision? Because it then separated Reform Judaism from the rest of the traditional Jewish world, which to this day says matriarchal descent for Jewish identity. And now, when you say that your movement is saying patriarchal as well, there's a serious issue now where you have more than a few people who are considered Jews by the Reform movement, who consider themselves Jews, have grown up as Jews, been educated as Jews, who the other movements are going to say, guess what? We don't think you're Jewish. That's a big issue. Later on, I'll talk about how I've dealt with some of these questions in my own years as a rabbi. Okay. So as far as her, question, and why was it controversial? Because one can say you're making this is a big decision, and some people are not going to accept it. It creates a division. Do we not have enough divisions within the Jewish world? You hear all the speakers, Jewish unity, we all should be together. And in reality, it's not an easy one. Yes, there are some issues that we all agree upon, but aren't there a lot of issues that we don't agree upon? Now so the reform was saying, let's find another one so we don't agree. Well, but they felt they true to their own principles, they needed to make this decision. Okay. So when we looked at this, we noticed that there is the question of illicit intercourse. There was a question as to should a child be, we certainly have learned that putting anyone in the category of mamzer is not a good thing. So let's try to reduce the number of mamzerot. Okay, so they some say that the union between a Jew and a non-Jew was to have no legal status, and sometimes they said they were mamzer. But now we say, well, if it may be a Jew and a non-Jew, but if the woman was Jewish, they're not a mamzer, they're a Jew. Okay, so that's a positive thing, right? Now here's the question. We'll see that Shai Cohen deals with this as well. Patriarchal descent was the primary way of determining the status of children in this period. I would argue that's almost correct. The assumption made, for example, let's take King Solomon, for example. I understand he got married a lot of times, and that his wives and his children were considered to be legitimate. In biblical times, the assumption was that if a non-Jewish woman married into a different group, i.e. the Jews, that in and of itself made her part of her husband's group. Conversion to Judaism was unknown, did not start being practiced till hundreds of years later. And in ancient times, a woman, now, is this surprising? That a woman marries a man and then she goes, she takes on the status and the tribe of the man. Used to be in couples, the man got a job someplace outside of where the couple was living. Was there any question that they moved for the guy's job and not for the wife's job? Was that typical? Yeah, I would say that was fairly typical. Nowadays, we don't see that, but the idea that once you marry, so yes, it did develop to be patriarchal, but not just, it happens to be patriarchal. It happened because of the movement of woman into the husband's group. Okay. And that's true. No question about it in the biblical times. Now, why was this? We'll look at Shai Cohen. He's going to make that argument, that we'll see the arguments that he makes. One of the arguments he makes that they followed Roman law. They were influenced by the Romans. That could be true. Again, we're looking at what I've mentioned before is the genetic fallacy, i.e., once we figured out where something came from, if we don't like where it came from, we can say it's invalid, i.e., if we can figure out where the matriarchal principle came from, and it came from something odd, why do we have to follow it today? But that ignores the fact that even if we figure out where it came from, it may have had other layers of meaning added to it over the years. It's like the people who say, well, Jews don't eat pork, so they don't get trichinosis. Although you all know you're not going to get trichinosis nowadays from pork. Well, at least up until recently, we used to have meat being carefully uh, overseen by the federal government. Well, let's assume that's still true. And the fact is that maybe that was true for all we know, and we'll never know. But the fact is that this has become an important aspect of Jewish life. Okay. The argument that Teshuvah makes that the rabbis changed the laws of descent to meet the problems of a specific age. And if those problems persisted, then the changes remained in effect. However, the changes may have remained in effect, but may have become part of the structure of the system. Okay, so they talk about in the biblical period, and this is again questionable. We'll see that there was patriarchal descent. Okay, although again, it's not just patriarchal; it's the wife moves in, marries, and becomes part of the husband's tribe, group, family. Okay. Yes, in Mishnaic and Talmudic times, they changed it. Correct. That did change. Okay. So then they go back and they say, well, okay, we know that. But since the reform movement has espoused the equality of men and women, and we recognize civil marriage, so that there's not a question as to the appropriateness of marriages of Jews and non-Jews. And they point out that we have equated matriarchal and patriarchal descent in the determination of the identity of a child of a mixed marriage, and they and the resolution in the reform movement said that that person needed to have positive acts of identification. So they basically have said the following. Okay, here are the conclusions. We are aware that we have made more stringent requirements than our tradition. Yes and no. We'll see where that goes. We believe we will lead to a firmer commitment to Judaism on the part of these individuals and enable them to become fully integrated into the Jewish community. Let's be very direct here. Were there not a large numbers of intermarriages, this issue would never have come up. It is a reaction to open society where intermarriage is very common. We do not view birth as a determining factor. We distinguish between descent and identification. The diminished influence of the extended family, education. This is what they declared. The Central Conference of American Rabbis declares that the child of one Jewish parent is under the presumption of Jewish descent. Now, technically, this would also mean whether it's the mother or the father, right? This presumption of the Jewish status of the offspring of any mixed marriage is to be established through appropriate and timely public and formal acts of identification. The performance of these mitzvot serves to commit those to participate in them, both parents and child, in Jewish life. Depending on the circumstances, very hazy here. We'll look at this. Mitzvot leading to positive exclusion, entering into the covenant. I guess they don't want to say Brit Milah, I guess. Acquisition of a Hebrew name, Torah study, bat mitzvah, and Kabbalah confirmation. For those beyond childhood, other acts of public declaration may be added. By this rule, a person who had a Jewish mother and never knew that his or her mother was Jewish and never did anything Jewish in their life, never went to Hebrew school, never went to synagogue, if such a person showed up before a Reform rabbi, the Reform rabbi would have to say, you're not Jewish. But if this person showed up before a conservative or an Orthodox rabbi, that rabbi would say, you are Jewish because your mother was Jewish. And we have cases like that, by the way. Among rabbis, we discuss, oh yeah, I just found, this woman came to me, she just found out that her grandmother and her mother were Jewish, but she was raised as an Episcopalian. And she came up to me. And now she doesn't go to the Episcopalian church anymore. She was never confirmed there. She just went a couple times when she was a kid. Is this person a Jew? Well, by the Reform definition, they're not. By the Orthodox and conservative movement, they are. Now, orthodoxy and conservative might disagree. Well, if this person formally became a member of a different religion, whether or not that they're a Jew, let's say that never happened. So this creates some interesting divisions. And by the way, I would argue that in such a case for the Reform rabbi, I assume, and I assume this is correct, they would make it really easy for this person to be considered Jewish. They wouldn't put too many stumbling blocks in front of them. Okay, so are we clear what's going on here? And again, to go back to Rabbi Barmash's questions, which I just conveniently put on the top of this. There we go. So we've seen their arguments. What does it mean, taking a Hebrew? So that's the person I just spoke about, right? Finds out late in life that they are Jewish. What would they have to do? Take on a Hebrew name, read a Jewish book, come to Shabbat services? It's a little unclear. But that's where they are. Okay, any question or comment about this? About this? You know, the other point is that it does mean that for people who are in intermarriages and whose mothers are not Jewish, can be considered Jewish if they go to take part in some positive Jewish identification. That's not an insignificant number of people.
I mean, just as a personal reaction, Rabbi, I like the idea of an open tent where you have more rather than less people in Judaism. So maternal, paternal, to me, is both acceptable if they accept the fact that they're Jews and they live a Jewish life. They are Jews.
Yeah, the traditional answer to that is you want to be a Jew and your mother was not a Jew, but your father was, you can convert to Judaism. If you really want to be a Jew, convert. Then there won't be any questions. Now, the argument against that is, why should they have to, right? As we read here. And
well, it's a stumbling
let's take
block.
an example.
If they have to go through the conversion process, it's another obstacle that can be eliminated with the open tent idea.
Right. So let's take one. I'm not the only rabbi this happens to. Your couple comes to you and they want to get married. Turns out one of them is a patriarchal Jew. But this patriarchal Jew always thought of him or herself as a Jew because he or she went to Hebrew school, became bar bat mitzvah, and always considered themselves to be a Jew. And now they're marrying someone who is clearly a Jew through matriarchal descent, and they want me to marry them. Okay? So what's a rabbi to do?
What do you do?
What do you do? Okay. In this case, it was a woman. I said to her, look, I know no one is questioning whether or not you are a Jew. You've obviously lived that way all your life. Let's just clear the obstacles, make everything obvious and easy. We'll go to the mikveh, you'll dunk in the mikveh, and we'll be done. I have had situations like that. I've never had someone, I have not had it. It gets more tricky, of course, with males because of a brit milah, circumcision. With males or females in that type of situation, it's just, it's dunking, shall we say. And but for males, it can be more complicated. Yeah.
Do you require a token?
Yes, hatifat ambrit, yes. Yeah, taking of a drop of blood. Let's make it more complicated. What if they were never circumcised as an 8-day-old? We had in Nashville, and I'm sure all over the country, Jewish boys who were born in Russia and who were not circumcised. Sometimes their mothers were Jews, sometimes not. And the Russian Jews, some of you may know, first of all, had no opportunity to learn about Judaism while they were in the Soviet Union. And some of them married non-Jews and some of them married Jews. And then they had children who came over. So we did have actually some doctors, and we had to bring some young boys It's a more serious hospital procedure. We also, for some of those couples, we had a second marriage because they never had a Jewish, the parents never had a Jewish marriage. So we sort of had a mass Jewish marriage for a number of those couples in Nashville. I understand around the country that happened as well. I don't deny that these are issues. Okay. So let's take a look at how the conservative movement deals with these issues. I just we need a piece of paper. There it is. Okay. I'm going to take a brief, we're going to go kind of quickly, and then we'll see the summary of where is it? Give me, I need a, okay, yeah, I have to go here, and then we have to go someplace else. There we go. Okay. This is the classic article. I don't remember. I don't remember the date. It was written not that long ago. I believe 70s or 80s. I have the date somewhere. I just don't have it right here. Okay. And here it is, 1985. Oh, thank you. Judaism magazine, 1985. And I remember reading it in 1985. Excuse me. Allergy season. Warning. 1985 was the year that I moved from East Windsor, New Jersey to Nashville, Tennessee. And the winter of 1985. Where was I? I was still in East Windsor. Anyway, I read it in 1985. It is long and complex. We're going to take a quick go through it quickly, and then we'll look at a summary. But his goal is what he says. What is the origin? How do we know? Where did it come from? Right? He's going to look at the biblical text of the Second Temple period. Right now, the Second Temple period, talking about before the Common Era, several hundred years before the Common Era, right after the return from Babylonian exile. And the Second Temple is destroyed in the 2nd century of the Common Era. So talking about maybe a 500-year period or 500-year period. And then he tries to explanations for the origin. And he is going to notice by this, I think is clever, is what he's very clear. He's a great scholar. I attempt to reach a conclusion. He does not say, I'm going to tell you why. And he knows he can't tell us why because he realizes that there's a lot of obscurity as to what exactly happened. So he talks about the biblical period, right? The foreign woman who married an Israelite husband was supposed to leave her gods in her father's house, but even if she did not, it never occurred to anyone to argue that her children were not Israelites. You go to, whoever you are, you marry an Israelite, that's who you are, okay? The woman was joined to the house of Israel by being joined to her Israelite husband. The act of marriage was functionally equivalent to the later idea of conversion. So again, you can't, with all seriousness, say this creates the patriarchal principle. No, it creates the principle that if you're a woman who's not Jewish and you marry a Jewish guy, you've come over, as your children will be. Now, so it's not so that's where sometimes I think some of the arguments get a little fuzzy, because some people say, oh, look, at patriarchal, no, we didn't have patriarchal. We had something that, yes, looks like it, but not exactly, right? So that should be clear, okay? An Israelite woman who was married to a foreigner, she usually became part of her husband's family. She was no longer under the direction or authority of her native people. So that was, leaving, a woman marries a non-Jewish person, that's biblical times. All right. This is not this is not America in the 21st century. You go where your husband is. Now, some people have this idea that it was like we have today. You know, the husband practices one religion, the wife practices a different religion. That's not uncommon in America. We're not talking about that type of period. There are some arguments made from the book of Ezra. After exacting a pledge from the notables of Jerusalem, this is after the exile. Yeah, we are to refrain from marriages with foreigners, that's men. Ezra attempted to expel from the community approximately 113 foreign wives with their children. Only two aspects of this obscure episode need to be treated. Why did Ezra virtually ignore the marriages between Israelite women and foreign men? And why did he attempt to expel the children of the foreign wives as well as the wives themselves? The bottom line is we're not 100% sure, but sometimes you do hear about Ezra. And yes, Ezra did not like intermarriages. Absolutely true. A little bit later, or around that time, the Second Temple period. The First Temple was destroyed by the Neo-Babylonian Empire in 586 BCE. And then some 50 or 70 years later, that empire fell, and the Persian king allowed the Jews to come back with Ezra. The idea that an offspring of a Jewish father and a Gentile mother is a Gentile is further diminished by the fact that this half of the matriarchal principle is never attested to explicitly and is contradicted implicitly by later literature of the Second Temple period. So in other words, to argue that, well, you know, this is all Ezra introduced this idea, there's no text saying he did. So things still are perhaps a bit fluid, okay? The absence of the exegesis from the vast majority of the Midrashic and exegetical works of the Second Temple, I mean, the Mishnaic period begins at the time of the Second Temple and ends with the destruction of the temple, right? Implies that these works are not familiar with the matriarchal principle. Second Temple, right? Second Temple, First Temple is destroyed 586 BCE. You have the return, then around the 5th century BCE to the 2nd century of the Common Era, Second Temple period, unclear. No texts that say anything about that. Okay. Philo, who was a Jewish philosopher, Paul and Josephus, now dealing with the early centuries of the Common Era, 1st century, are unfamiliar with either part of, he's saying either part, i.e., that it's matriarchal and it's not patriarchal. So in other words, 1st century Common Era, not there. Okay. Then he looks at other texts. The Apocrypha are books that are not in the Bible, such as the books of the Maccabees, right? Which is later in the early part of the Common Era. Qumran scrolls, Philo, Paul, Josephus, books of Acts are not familiar with the rabbinic matriarchal principle. It is probably not a coincidence that most of these works also do not know that the foreign women can convert to Judaism by means other than marriage, i.e., conversion doesn't exist. So the only way the woman becomes part of the father's family, they marry, then their religion is the same. Again, we're all the way up to the beginning centuries of the Common Era. Okay. If the only way a foreign woman can convert to Judaism through marriage, the biblical material prevents any, since the Bible shows that children of such marriages are accepted as Israelites. So the Bible doesn't know it at all. Okay. Then when you start getting into the period of the Mishnah, right? We're going to get, let's say the period of the Mishnah ends around in the 2nd century of the Common Era. And it goes back a couple of 100 years. So there's some overlap here. The literary unity of the Mishnah Two assumptions. Some marriages are valid and some are invalid. The status of the offspring is determined not by the marriage of the parents, but by the potential of the parents to contract a valid marriage with each other. People who aren't properly divorced, people who have people who are a mamzer, right? So the Mishnah is really dealing very, very technically. I'm gonna move down here. Okay. One Mishnah clearly states that the offspring of a Gentile mother and a Jewish father is a Gentile. We have that in the Mishnah. And offers a reason, although the reason may not be the original one, right? In other words, we can't always be sure that the Mishnah reflects accurately the original meaning of something. It may. Another Mishnah clearly states that the offspring of a Jewish mother and a Gentile father, now here is terrible, is a mamzer. And we know how bad that is, but offers no reason for this ruling. By the way, that's a ruling that is no longer, which is rejected later on, right? We know that's not how you become a mamzer. You only become a mamzer if there's some prohibition that is being violated by the wedding, by the union of the parents. Here it's saying, Jewish mother, non-Jew, have a child, you're a mamzer. Not Jewish law today. The reason offered for the first ruling may be applicable to other Mishnah does. In other words, we just, again, don't know what's going on. All right, I'm going to come down here to some of his conclusions as to where it came from. The matriarchal principle is not attested either in the Bible or the literature of the Second Temple period. Second Temple, remember, is destroyed by the Romans in the 1st century. Even in the 1st century of our era, it is still unknown. The Mishnah states the two halves of the matriarchal principle are by, why did the rabbis break with previous practice? The innovation or innovations, if we keep the two halves separate, can be explained either as the product of a new ideology. How did this matriarchal principle get there? Well, maybe a new ideology or response to new social conditions, which, by the way, the Reform movement claims that the only reason it came about was because of new social conditions, not necessarily because there were ideas behind it, but because social conditions changed. Okay, he's going to treat each differently. Is it because social conditions are different or because certain ideas are different? Okay, so ideological origins, this is a very long period. I didn't. Okay. The idea: you shall not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughter to his son. This is issues with the ability of idolatry to infiltrate into the Jewish people. So that's an ideological issue. Okay, that we have. Ezra, we really we're just not sure. Okay, here we go. The rabbis restricted the matriarchal principle to cases of intermarriage or paternity is no more certain in marriages than in unions between Jews. Paternity is a question. The rabbis did not require marriage between the father and the mother for the offspring to inherit. If an unmarried woman is pregnant and declares that the father of her child is a priest, a Kohen, Rabbi Gamliel says that she is to believe. If the woman becomes pregnant as the result of rape, the offspring is presumed to have the same status as the majority of the people where the rape occurred. In these cases, paternity is very uncertain, but the rabbis did not judge the offspring through matrilineal. Okay, woman is raped. Is the child a Jew or not? Well, it depends. Was she raped in a city where the vast majority of the residents were Jews? Let's assume the rapist was a Jew. But what if she's raped in Rome, which had a Jewish community, which I actually walked around not so long ago? or the vast majorities are non-Jews. So again, it's not the mother's status. They're looking at other factors. Now, someone suggested the principle of the natural closeness between mother and child. That's why we're matriarchal, because mother and child have a natural closeness. The offspring with Gentile mother and a Jewish father is a Gentile because of the intimate connection between a mother and her child makes certain she will influence and instruct him in the ways of the Gentiles. Hey, remember when in divorce cases, it was almost automatic that the mother got custody? Joint custody? That's a fairly new idea, is it not? So it was almost automatic. This idea isn't something that went away so quickly. But he says it's unconvincing. The ancients, both Jewish and Gentile, recognized the intimacy of motherhood, but drew no legal inferences from this intimacy. It is not until the 19th century that the legal systems of Europe began to recognize the legal rights of a mother to her children, which again, it was reflected in how divorces worked up until fairly, joint custody. Why? It's the mother, right? Okay. Excuse me. Now we have some other possibilities. There is a second suggestion that the matriarchal principle entered rabbinic thought through the influence of Roman law. Now, this is, a possibility. The rabbis knew Greek, right? We have Greek and Roman things in our tradition. I always like to say, what's the most famous Greek word in Jewish life? Afikomen, right? That's Greek. The rabbis, there's a whole series of scholars who studied this. Jews were living in Rome. Like I said, as some of you know, I was away. I was in Italy, and I walked through the Jewish ghetto in Rome, which has been there for a very, very long time. Okay. Roman law. The suggestion is not new, but what's the evidence? Here's, there's somebody cutting the grass outside my window. So can you still hear me? I hope I'm clear.
Yes.
Or just wait a second. Is that noise coming through?
No, it's not Rabbi. No.
Okay. They're trimming some of the grass back there. Okay. Let's just leave it. I'm not going to go. This is very complicated. Let's just take, here's the general principle. Did Roman law, which had its own rules, affect how the rabbis looked at who was a Jew? Okay. And he's going to argue, possibly. If a Roman citizen marries a non-citizen woman, the children are non-citizens. They're going after who? The father, right? If a Roman citizen has intercourse with a slave woman, the children are slaves. If a Roman matron marries a non-citizen, the children are citizens, except that well, I don't speak Latin, a law during the first century declared that children such children follow the parent with the lower status. That is, of course, a non-Roman citizen was the lower status. So there were clear rules in the Roman Empire. Similarly, the children of a Roman matron by a slave, heaven forbid a slave and a Roman woman should have sexual relations. Let's not think about Joseph, right? Okay. According to the theory, free citizens like their mother, except the law enacted under Claudius, declared that they are slaves. So, so there what we do have are clear laws about status. Why these laws are this way, I'm not an expert on Roman law. Charlie?
Yeah, I was going to say that the requirements of citizenship, but citizens get certain benefits. And so the rules may be different for citizenship versus conversion to a religion, where they might be more open.
But recognize in Roman times, in these early
It would
periods,
be more restrictive with the citizenship.
Citizenship gave you quite serious benefits in the Roman Empire.
Yes.
And you couldn't and we understand religious conversion, but that didn't even exist at that time. So it's very important for the Romans,
And
who
by the way, this is an issue
administratively were
today.
very
That's an
good,
issue
right?
today, but this is
Sorry,
birthright.
Charlie, what did you say?
That's an issue today, the birthright
Yes,
situation.
citizens. Who is right? Hey, same issue. Who is a citizen? You marry a citizen. If you're a non-citizen and you marry a citizen, right? That's an issue. The birthright. So the idea that the Roman Empire had clear rules about how no question, both parents are citizens, not a problem. But this is the Roman Empire. This is the real world. You've got unions between slaves and Romans and Macedonians and who knows what else, right? So you have to have rules. Okay, Harold.
But Jews were made citizens of Rome. Jews became Roman citizens.
Yes, you could become a citizen of Rome. That is actually correct. I'm not familiar how that happened and exactly the process, but yes, Jews were citizens of Rome. Jews were gladiators. Jews were slaves. Jews were all over the place. And they lived in Rome, right? So, what is clear? Let's be. Rome had clear laws about who is a citizen, and they made clear laws about the children of a citizen and a non-citizen. Okay, that is clear. I mean, there are some conceptual similarities. Marriages between citizens and marriages between non-citizens for children who's determined patriarchally. Okay. Marriages between citizens and non-citizens produce children whose status, in theory, is determined matriarchal. Okay. But both legal systems tend to equalize the consequences for male and female citizens who stray from the fold. You marry a non-Roman citizen, or you have sex with a non-Roman citizen, you have a child. A Roman matron impregnated by a non-citizen or a slave bears a non-citizen or a slave, not a citizen. A Jewish woman impregnated by a Gentile or a slave becomes a mamzer, a rule which does not apply today, but applied then. But look at that similarity with the Roman law. Okay, a citizen of serious impaired status, which we just studied. So that's a serious issue. But you see that Jewish law and Roman law seem to have some sort of parallels. Okay. So we're going to go, okay. My third suggestion sees the matriarchal principle not as the result of external influence, but as an organic part of rabbinic thought. Let's just say this first. Jewish thought likes to things clear. You're one thing or you're not another. Heck, the Bible itself, how does the Bible begin? God divides things. Land, water, sky and the earth and the sky. Divisions, clear categorization starts in the first chapter of the book of Genesis. And the rabbis have, much of the time, a lot of the Talmud talks about, is this person pure or impure? Did he accidentally touch her body? Didn't accidentally touch her body? Which category is he in? How do we move from one category to another? Is the meat kosher or not kosher? Is it Shabbat or not Shabbat? Is this city in the land of Israel? Not in the land of Israel, right? You're a Kohen. What can and can't you do? So this idea of categorization is an essential aspect of Jewish thought. Holy, non-holy, Havdalah. Why do we call it Havdalah? Right? Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol. All those divisions are mentioned at the end of Shabbat. Okay. So, he's talking about the consequences of intermarriage should be juxtaposed to its discussion of the results of mixed breeding. What's the great example? Horses, mules, and donkeys. Right? What happens? Right? Does it belong to the father or the mother? or new species. A mule is neither a horse nor a donkey, right? The mule is the offspring of a horse and a donkey, but a new and different species. It makes no difference whether the mule's mother is a horse or a donkey. The mule is a mule. Okay, we can understand how the rabbis, they have some difficulties. Okay, we got this new thing, got a mixture in it. We got to make a decision. That's what it is. And he says that may be part of what's happening here, is that the rabbis need to have clear definition of who's who and what's what. And just as there are rabbinic rules about the offsprings of certain animals, that clarifies the status of the offspring. We need to have clear rules about the offsprings of Jews and non-Jews. So let's take this and apply it to that. That's possible. Okay. The laws of forbidden mixtures. Is it Roman law or the laws of forbidden mixtures? He kind of summarizes here. Yeah, I've suggested 5 possibilities. The uncertainty of paternity. You always know who the mother is, but you're never sure who the father is. Okay, you hear that argument. The intimacy of motherhood, the closeness of the mother to the child. Roman law, the laws of forbidden mixtures. He likes the last 2 are more compelling than the first 3. Well, the first one was also the Ezra episode where Ezra said, get rid of your foreign wives. The major difficulty with all of them, however, is that they explain how the rabbis had come to the principle, but not why. Oh, they did it because I liked Roman law. Oh, they did it because the mother there was always known. But why make that decision? What compelled them to depart from the biblical tradition from the practice of the Second Temple? Did some societal need dictate the Jewish law? Then you have the argument, the rape of the Jewish woman during the Roman conquest. A lot of Jewish women were raped when the Romans destroyed the temple, and they have all these children now, and their fathers were Romans, but their mothers are Jews. What do you do? Right? So some arguments have been made that the matriarchal principle came out of as a result of the rebellion against Rome. Okay, pity for their plight. But the quality of the suggestion befits the obscurity of its origin, because telling an unfortunate woman who has been raped that she's about to bear a mamzer, remember that the original law was that if your father was a non-Jew and you're a mother, now your child is the mamzer. Oh, that, right, is only slightly more consolatory than telling her that she's about to bear a non-Jew. What's better? Oh, it's a mamzer. Oh, it's a non-Jew. Neither seems to be a good idea in the 1st century of the Common Era, right? Or any time. In some respects, it is worse. A Gentile can convert to Judaism, but a mamzer can never be legitimized. Right? Further, why declare the offspring of a Jewish father and a Gentile mother to be a Gentile? If the purpose was to discourage intermarriage, there seems to have been little need for such legislation. Intermarriage was not a problem in the 1st century of the Common Era. Did it happen? Yes. But was it a problem like we have today in an issue? Let's call it an issue that we have in the United States? No, totally different. Perhaps 1st century Rome, whoops, here we go. Alexander, intermarriage was not uncommon, but it certainly was uncommon in 1st century Judea and in rabbinic society generally throughout the following centuries, right? It just didn't happen. So we're not talking about a common thing. And if the primary motivation was to restrain intermarriage, well, then the rabbis should have introduced a bilateral requirement for citizenship, both parents. So it's not like it was a common thing. Okay, so here's his summary. So now he's laid out all of these arguments. I think he's also effectively laid out why some of them aren't so strong, and we really don't know a lot. Okay, so here's the I just want to see how much more we had in this paper. Again, you can read it yourself if you like, but I'm warning, he really gets very specific. Okay, here's the summary. In the biblical period, mixed marriages produced an offspring, judged patriarchal. That we know very clear. If an Israelite woman was married to a non-Israelite, she would join his clan. If he joined her clan through, well, again, he's using some technical terms, the children were, in other words, in the unusual situation where the male married an Israelite woman and joined her clan, think Boaz and Ruth. Well, that's matriarchal, right? Okay. Okay. Then we have this issue of the mamzerim, because in the period of then he says, but wait a second, in the period of the Mishnah, children of an Israelite mother and a Gentile father were mamzerim. But the Talmud changes that. The children are not mamzerim, but are legitimate Jews. Okay. Many Israelite men married foreign women. There was never any doubt that their children were Israelite. The offspring of a slave mother and Israelite father did suffer from some disability, but no one questioned its Israelite statement. The Mishnah says that such offspring follow the mother, and this ruling is not disputed in the Talmud. Okay. There is no evidence that Ezra attempted to introduce the matriarchal principle. You know, he just wanted to get rid of the idolatry. Okay. There are good explanations, one internal, one external. The matriarchal accords with the Mishnaic laws requiring the mixtures of diverse kinds. In other words, the rabbi said, look, we got these mixtures, and sometimes the mixtures are mixed crops, mixed animals, you know, and things of that nature. It's similar to the union of a horse and a donkey. Now, I know this does not sound very nice, but he is just trying to deal with the evidence. And the evidence seems to imply that this issue of what do you do with mixtures, how do you clarify them, occurs by the rabbis. And we have the Roman law, which is also parallel. The rabbis, like the Romans, departed from the principle to penalize a citizen woman who married a non-citizen. The Romans declared that the offspring follows the parent of the lower status, the father. The rabbis declared that the offspring is a mamzer. I am unable to decide between these two explanations, i.e., he tells you right away, was it Roman law or was it the rabbis following the laws of mixtures? I don't know, he says. And then he points out that conversion is a creation of the exilic period after the destruction of the Second Temple. At first was an option for men, it's ritual circumcision. A Gentile woman converted to Judaism through marriage with a Jewish husband. Okay. Only later was conversion for women introduced. Okay. All of these suggestions are exercises in intellectual history. Now, here's where it's an interesting. It says, I'm just talking intellectual history. I'm not talking about what you should do today. Did social history play a role? The Reform movement said yes. Numerous practices of Judaism, scientific study of the past, have argued that rabbinic law was determined by social and economic needs of contemporary Jewry. Counting women in the minyan? Where did that come from? The matriarchal principle has had enormous social consequences for modern Jews. It's easy to believe that the rabbis must have compelled by some societal need to institute it. That's what the Reform movement said. But there is little evidence to support this belief. Now, you could argue that the Reform movement is reacting to the large number of intermarriages, and within intermarriages, there are couples who do want to raise their children as Jews, and that's absolutely true. So the Reform marriage movement is reacting to social movements, which is okay, but accept it at that, and don't pretend that that's what was going on in the ancient world. Intermarriage was not a severe problem in rabbinic society. Even if it was, the logical response would have been the institution of a bilateral system. Either a Gentile father or Gentile mother renders the offspring Gentile. You know, in other words, the rabbis wanted to really stop intermarriage. They just sort of said, hey, whether you're male or female, you marry a non-Jew, kid's not a Jew. Right? I mean, that would make sense. That's his argument. Perhaps in regard to other matters, the rabbis or legislators listening attended the demands of the constituency. In their statement of the matriarchal principle, however, the rabbis are philosophers, and like most philosophers, they did not always live in the real world. They made decisions that were legal, but maybe they didn't fully respond to the real world. That's the Shai Cohen article. Okay, that's your classic article on this. Comments or questions? Agree with him? Think he's made a good argument? Charlie.
Was this a teshuva or an article? No,
I'm sorry.
Was this a
He's writing this as a historian. This is not a teshuva. I'll get to the teshuva later. This is a historian writing an article, a professor of Jewish studies, who at that time was at JTS and later moved to Harvard. And I would say, I think you would agree, of great intellectual ability and knowledge. This is not there is no intent in this article to say this is what Jewish law should be today. It's just an attempt to say, where did this come from? And the answer he has is, not sure. Here are 5 explanations. I like these 2.
The bilateral system.
Well, no, he doesn't. He said they could have had a bilateral system, but they did. In other words, the rabbis rejected the idea. If they wanted to stop intermarriage, why not just say that a Jew must have 2 Jewish parents? But they didn't. Right? That's his argument. Now you can think that's not a strong argument, but that's the argument they're saying. That was really the intent to stop intermarriages. But intermarriages are just not it certainly in rabbinic times, early rabbinic times, and then later, just wasn't an issue. Comments, questions? Are you a little overwhelmed by
it certainly hasn't stopped intermarriage. I mean,
well, again,
if not, it's more than less. And I'm in favor of the bilateral system, but I could be a minority. I'm not sure.
I see. Right. I mean, here is. Let me just. We have another 2 minutes. This is a brief summary of the. Here we go. We'll get back to that. The other part of this. Okay, Cohen. Yeah, this is Who is a Jew from a website, My Jewish. Instead of doing a 35-page study, which we just had, they summarize him in 3 paragraphs. He says Cohen has written about it. The change to matriarchal came in late antiquity. 2 theories: one that they took it from the Roman legal system, right, and another one that developed from the already existing conclusion about mixed breeding, right? I love it. In this mixed breeding in the animal kingdom, the author of this article doesn't want to say donkeys, mules, and horses. It just doesn't really sound so nice. The mule whose mother, I'm sorry, I take that back. The mule whose mother was a horse and whose father is a donkey should be allowed to mate with other horses because the mother was a horse. This implies that horsehood is passed through the mother, and this may have been extrapolated by the rabbis to go beyond the animal kingdom. Cohen presents both theories, which we just saw, but admits neither have been proven conclusively. My guess, they never will be. Short of coming up with a parchment scroll from ancient times that say, the rabbis one day argued about this, and this was why we decided it this way, and this is why we didn't decide. But that's just not going to happen. So Cohen says, that's, by the way, Cohen could be wrong, but that's where he comes to. He doesn't like the mother is closest. He doesn't like we always know the mother and not the father. And he doesn't like Ezra introduced something. He doesn't like the rape of the Roman soldiers argument. He likes these other 2. Okay. Comments, questions? Yeah, Carol.
I just think it's interesting to understand how both principles came about. And therefore, you can make a decision on the basis of what society needs today. Social needs created both matrilineal or patrilineal descent. And for me, that would determine what we need to accept today. What does society need?
Right. I mean, you're right. We are juggling several things. By the way, Cohen will argue that it was not necessarily a societal need. The reform movement says it is a societal need. I'm not going to try to argue who's right there. But the point that you're making is when you're dealing with a traditional system, to what degree are the needs of the time sufficient to make a change in the system, as opposed to areas where the system has always functioned in a certain way, and to make a change because of the needs of the time is something that people are either reluctant or won't do because they feel that just is a break in the foundation of the system, right? And people, and then we'll take a little look at that some more. Okay, any other comments?
Well, halacha, I mean, in the Orthodox world, they're very restrictive. In the conservative world, they're sort of in the middle, and the Reform world is on the loose side of the
More open,
interpretation.
yeah. So I mean these are the questions, and again, the question of where did it come from may or may not play an important role in where does it go.
I
Just
mean, when Carol
recognize
was
again.
talking about the social aspects, some people don't look at what society needs. They look at what religion determines or religion says.
Or
They're
they say,
more
yeah,
stricter interpretation.
right. Again, remember the genetic fallacy. Just because you figured out where it comes from doesn't necessarily you solved the question of what it really means.
Yeah.
Okay, why did Jews wear kippot? We're still not 100% sure about that one. But is anyone going to argue? Well, we shouldn't do, well, people have. We shouldn't do it because, it was probably some sort of Roman thing for slaves or something, The question of, like I said, or, people say, oh, we have the USDA, we don't have to worry about trichinosis. Well, they're right about trichinosis. But the question is, what is the meaning of having dietary laws become, rather than saying, well, I think I figured out because I know where it came from. That's something that needs weighing. And I hope what we've seen here with this question of matriarchal descent, this much I would say we'll go with Shai Cohen. We're not 100% sure. Things definitely changed in the past. At one point in the rabbinic period, it was very clear matriarchal. Why they went that way, not 100% sure. It's been that way for 2,000 years. Is there enough evidence today to change it? That we can argue about. Social need. And we'll see some of the arguments next week. Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions? That was a tough one, I have to tell you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That was a tough article. I mean, I
wasn't going to print all 35 pages.
No,
Maybe now I will.
well, it's up to you. Depends on how much time you have. If you do, I will tell you this. You're gonna have to read it very, very slowly, and you might have to take notes because he argues very concretely and very specifically. It's a great article, and it is now the seminal. And anyone who argues about this question, they have to deal with this article. It's the basis for everything now that we argue about. Okay, great. Good to see all of you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank
Enjoy the
you.
rest of your days. And we'll continue to talk. Okay, so what we're going to do is continue talking a little bit more about matriarchal, patriarchal. We'll look at the conservative movement. We'll look at a teshuvah. Actually, we'll look at a teshuvah, as well as some other material. And we'll then go on to the question of the status of Ethiopian Jews, which also is in the next part of Rabbi Parmesh's book. Okay? Take care. Have a good day.